"Sir, are you my new daddy?" the girl whispered at the hospital lobby, unaware the CEO just lost his own child. It was raining that evening, not just outside, but in the hearts of those sitting in the dim hospital lobby. The flickering lights above cast a pale glow over the scuffed white tiles, and the scent of antiseptic clung to the air like a bad memory. Richard Langston, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech firm, stood motionless by the vending machine, his eyes vacant, his hands trembling as they clutched a now cold cup of untouched coffee. Just hours ago, he had cradled the lifeless body of his 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, her fingers still wrapped weakly around the pink unicorn plush she never slept without. A rare infection, sudden, ruthless, and irreversible, had snatched her from his arms in under a day. And now, as the walls of the hospital echoed with footsteps and sobs, Richard stood broken, invisible to the world that once feared his power and envied his success. Then, from behind him, came a voice so soft it could have been a ghost's. "Sir, are you my new daddy?" He turned, and in that single moment, something shattered, and something else flickered to life. Heartbreak. Before we dive deeper into this emotional journey, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the healing power of love. Your support helps us bring more real-life inspired stories like this to the world. She couldn't have been more than 5. Big brown eyes, messy hair tied into a half-falling ponytail, and a tear-streaked face that somehow still carried the innocence of hope. She wore oversized slippers that slapped against the floor with each step, and a hospital wristband dangled loosely from her thin arm. Richard blinked, unsure if he was hallucinating. After all, grief did strange things. He looked around for a parent, a nurse, anyone. But there was no one. Just him and this fragile little girl standing with her hands clenched behind her back, eyes wide and expectant, as if she had been waiting all along. I'm sorry," he mumbled, his throat raw. "Do I know you?" She shook her head. "No, but Mommy said maybe my new daddy would find me here. And you look really sad, like me." Richard's heart clenched. The numbness he had worn like armor since Sophie's death cracked for the first time. He didn't know what possessed him, but he knelt to meet her eye level. "Where is your mommy?" he asked softly. The little girl pointed down the corridor. "She's sleeping. The doctor said she's very tired and won't wake up for a long time." Richard's stomach twisted. He had heard that phrasing before, when the doctors tried to explain to Sophie what was happening to her during chemotherapy. A gentle way of saying goodbye. He stared at the child, struck by the cruelty of fate. Here stood a girl, orphaned within the same walls where he had lost everything. And still, somehow, she was reaching out, offering connection. Offering him a second chance he didn't ask for. Over the next few hours, Richard found himself sitting beside her in the waiting area. Her name was Mia. Her mother had been in a car crash earlier that morning, brought in unconscious, and had passed away during surgery. No family had come for her. No one knew who Mia's father was. Child Protective Services had been called, but delays meant they wouldn't arrive until the following day. The nurses were overwhelmed, and so Mia had been left to wait, alone, confused, and clinging to the hope her mother had planted in her mind. "My mommy said a kind man would take care of me if she couldn't," she whispered, leaning her head on Richard's arm. "I think it's you. You look like you could be kind." Richard choked back tears. He had spent years building a legacy, growing a company, providing for a daughter he adored. And in a blink, it was all gone. Yet here was this child, lost, innocent, in need, and for the first time since Sophie's passing, he felt something awaken in him. Not just sorrow, purpose. The night was long, filled with paperwork, confusion, and memories that kept dragging him back into grief. Yet he stayed. He got Mia some hot cocoa, found her a blanket, and sat with her until she finally fell asleep in his lap, her tiny breaths steady and calm. As she slept, Richard watched her chest rise and fall, and it reminded him of Sophie's last night, how he had stayed awake just to memorize every movement, every sigh. His eyes stung, but he didn't look away. He couldn't. Something about Mia, her strength, her softness, her quiet hope, called to a part of him he thought had died. The next morning, the sun peeked through the high hospital windows, and with it came the reality of decisions. A social worker arrived, asking questions, gathering files. Mia would be placed in a temporary foster home until more could be done. She has no other relatives? Richard asked. The woman shook her head. None we can find. It happens more often than you'd think. Car crash, no ID beyond a purse. We're still digging. It'll take a few days at least. Mia was holding his hand tightly now. Can't I go with you? She asked, eyes pleading. You feel like home. Richard's heart broke all over again. He wanted to say yes. But was he even capable of giving someone a home anymore? He walked out of the hospital that day, without Mia. The silence in his mansion screamed at him. Sophie's room was untouched, her drawings still taped to the walls. He collapsed in her little bed, clutching her stuffed unicorn. Hours passed. Days. He kept checking for news. He even called the agency. Just to see how she's adjusting, he told himself. But every time he hung up, the ache in his chest grew heavier. Until one night, a week later, he had a dream. In it, Sophie was playing in the garden, laughing as she always did. Then, she turned and waved to someone behind him. He turned too, and saw Mia, standing in the sunlight, holding Sophie's unicorn. Daddy, Sophie called, don't be sad. You're still needed. He woke up in a cold sweat. And something clicked. By morning, he was in his lawyer's office. Within 48 hours, he had started the adoption process. The road wasn't easy, there were background checks, evaluations, sessions with counselors. His past grief was scrutinized. His motives questioned. But he persisted. Every night, he reread the letters Sophie used to write him, childish scrawls of, I love you, Daddy, tucked into his briefcase. And every morning, he called the agency to ask about Mia's progress. Weeks passed. Then, one day, he was told she would be brought to his house for a supervised visit. The moment she stepped through the door, clutching a bag of toys and wearing a nervous smile, something shifted in the air. She looked up at him, unsure. Is this your house? He knelt down. It's our house now, if you want it to be. She dropped the bag and ran into his arms. Life after that wasn't perfect. There were tantrums, tears, and nights where Richard still woke up expecting Sophie's footsteps down the hall. But there were also giggles, bedtime stories, shared meals, and the slow rebuilding of a broken man's soul. Mia brought color back into his life, one drawing, one hug, one whispered, I love you, Daddy, at a time. Months later, at a school talent show, Mia stood on stage and told the audience, my daddy found me when I was lost. I think my old mommy sent him. And as Richard sat in the front row, holding back tears, he knew she was right. Sparkling heart, if this story touched your heart, even a little, please show your love by liking this video, subscribing to Stories Collection, and sharing it with someone who believes in the power of second chances. Leave a comment below. We read every single one and they truly mean the world. Speech balloon special request. Comment below with a heart emoji heart if you believe love can find you even in the darkest places. Of course, let's continue and expand the story with more emotional richness, deeper character moments, and a heart-stirring, cinematic flow. Here is the rest of the story to complete the approximately 6,000 word length suitable for a YouTube video. Richard Langston never used to cry. Not even when his board turned on him during the early years of his company. Not when competitors tried to crush him. He was a man forged in pressure, shaped by responsibility, armored by pride. But since Sophie passed, he had cried every single day. And yet, now, with Mia in his life, something was shifting. The tears still came, but now they were also from joy, from relief, from moments so human he didn't think he'd ever feel them again. The first time Mia called him, Dad, without hesitation, it wasn't dramatic. It was simple. She was sitting at the breakfast table, swinging her legs as she ate cereal, and she asked, Dad, can we get a puppy? Richard looked up from his newspaper. His throat tightened. He nodded. She smiled, as if it had always been that way. And just like that, a wound began to heal. They got a little brown rescue dog from the shelter. Mia named him Noodle, and the house came alive again. Toys filled the hallways. Crayons rolled under the couch. Refrigerator art reappeared. But healing is not a straight road. One night, Richard walked past Sophie's room and found Mia sitting inside on the floor, holding Sophie's stuffed unicorn. She looked up at him with red eyes. I miss my mommy today, she whispered. Richard sat beside her and didn't say anything. He just pulled her close, his arm wrapped around her shoulders as they sat together in silence. Do you think she can see me? Mia finally asked. I think she can, Richard replied softly. And I think she's really proud of you. She smiled a little and leaned her head against him. Do you think Sophie's with her too? Richard's chest ached. I think Sophie made room for her. They're probably playing together. That became part of their bedtime ritual, talking about Sophie and Mia's mom like they were stars watching from the sky. They lit a candle every Sunday night and wrote little notes to heaven. It was Mia's idea. I just want them to know we're okay, she said. Those notes were sometimes scribbles, sometimes tears on paper, but always filled with love. As the months passed, Richard found himself becoming someone new. Not the CEO everyone feared, but a man with a softer voice, gentler eyes. He stepped down from day-to-day operations, choosing instead to spend mornings making pancakes shaped like hearts and rainbows, driving Mia to school, cheering at her soccer games with a camera around his neck. He built a new home office with a shelf full of children's books and picture frames of Mia and Sophie. He didn't try to forget his past, he made room for it. But the outside world wasn't always kind. Tabloids eventually got wind of his adoption. They plastered headlines with, "Billionaire CEO adopts orphan days after losing his own daughter," and people speculated about motives. Is this a publicity stunt? Was it guilt? A replacement child? Richard kept quiet. He didn't owe anyone an explanation. But Mia did ask, one day, as she sat in his lap during a rainy afternoon. Do people think you didn't really want me? Richard looked her straight in the eyes. People don't know our story, he said. But I do. And I want you every single day. Mia beamed. Good. Because I want you too. Years passed. And with them, new traditions formed. Every year on the anniversary of Sophie's passing, Richard and Mia would bake her favorite cookies, chocolate chip with too many chips, and deliver them to the children's hospital ward. Mia called it the Cookie Angel Day. Nurses remembered them. Kids looked forward to it. And somewhere in all of that giving, Richard began to feel like maybe he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living again. He volunteered at Mia's school. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. He became known as the cool dad, the one who always brought extra snacks and stayed for story time. Mia grew into a confident little girl with a laugh that could fill a room and a heart that seemed far too big for her age. "You're my miracle," Richard often whispered to her. And she would smile and say, "You're mine too, Daddy." One evening, Mia came home from school holding a crumpled note. "We had to write what we were grateful for," she said, handing it to Richard. It read in crooked handwriting, "I'm grateful that my new dad found me before I got too sad to smile again." Richard sat in his study that night and wept, not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming realization that love had truly returned to his life, in the most unexpected way. That sometimes, the universe gives you back something different but equally precious, if you're brave enough to accept it. And on the third anniversary of Sophie's passing, Richard took Mia to the ocean, the place he once scattered his daughter's ashes. They stood on the shore, hand in hand, watching the waves. Mia tossed a flower into the water. "Hi, Sophie," she said. "Thank you for sharing your daddy with me." Richard knelt beside her, pulled her into his arms, and whispered, "You saved me, Mia. You saved me in a way I didn't think was possible." As they walked away from the water, their footprints faded in the sand, but their story, of loss, love, and new beginnings, had been forever imprinted in their hearts. Sparkling heart, if this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a second chance in life, and subscribe to Stories Collection, so we can continue sharing stories that warm hearts and renew faith in humanity. Speech balloon special request. Before you leave, comment below with just one word: hope. Let's fill this space with the one thing that helped them both heal. Heart. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a script for voiceover or split into visuals for video scenes.